Hey, it's Chris. Roundup! What do we got cooking? Well, this is the week of retreads? No, just kidding. The week of reprints? Well, kind of. The week of getting more stuff for games and IPs you've already known about for the most part, with a few new things smattered in all over the place. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's go and let's see what we got in store for you. As always, with 2024 now, we're keeping track. How many projects total are we going to have covered by the end of the year? Running tally, episode 2, season 2024. Let's go. First up, Conan, Monolith, Red Nails expansion, and a new versus mode. Because if you're not familiar with the original Conan game, Monolith basically created this one versus all system with a not great rule book, which then got transposed into Batman Gotham City Chronicles not great rule book, and now are finally, years later, swinging back around to this thing, giving it more of a life. And the weird thing is, and I'm not sure if this is just because, supply meets demand is an issue, because it hasn't really ever been reprinted, but people really have been picking it up on the secondary market, and it's really held its price from that aspect of things. And they're bringing back, as you saw at the top of that page there a second, the King Pledge, which is the original, little bit, not just core pledge from the original crowdfunding campaign, but just, the step up edition, if you will. This is bringing us more, and you're getting Red Nails, whatever that is, right? I have no nostalgia impact whatsoever from Conan, but I was an original backer on the first crowdfunding campaign because, my sort of can't get enough miniature games before realizing that I can't play a lot of them as well, right? The FOMO was strong with me from that time. And interestingly enough, straight off the top, they're going Kickstarter exclusive. And if you missed my video earlier in the week, I talked about a new type of FOMO, not just the exclusive, but the pre-exclusive. The exclusive before the exclusive. We'll talk about that separately, though. Check out that video. Now, Monolith is bringing back this core pledge as well as the slightly deluxified one with the additional new stuff here in addition. And then you can get some of the old stuff as well as, the expansions to go along with it, with the versus mode and the extra dice, whatever else you want, right? Now, interesting, and this is going to be the big test, how much stretch goal do they have for this? Because with the King Pledge previously, it was 2 boxes, core plus whole stretch goal. It was very reminiscent of Mythic Battles Pantheon Ragnarok, which I am still waiting for at the time of this filming. Because between somehow that and ISS Vanguard, which, it feels like 3/4 of the backers have gotten him at this point, I swear that I am literally one of the last 10% on every single freaking project that I back, which is an amazingly great run of things. But yeah, stretch goals. So a little bit split between the base and a little bit split between the versus mode maps. So, that's an expensive expansion, folks. I don't care. This thing better be almost standalone. Now, 10 scenarios, sure. But that's 70 euros, which is probably like $75, between 75 and 80 if I look down here probably at the actual pledge levels without guessing. Yeah, $75 before shipping. And I'm going to guess because they're a European-based company, shipping to North America is not probably going to be that pretty. So let's take a look though. I'm just curious. Let's skip down to the bottom here. Yeah, ooh, my goodness. So 20 to 30 euros. So you're talking 105 potential dollars-ish for just an expansion, folks. Now, with Conan, with this previously, right, this wasn't available. This is a one versus all system unless you're going into the versus mode, which offers just a lot of the other things that you've seen with campaign scenario-driven games in the first place that are miniature heavy, right? You're going to have a couple miniatures that you like. You're going to have a bunch of miniatures you're not going to use. Unless you make this a lifestyle game, it's really going to be hard to play through any significant portion of the content. The great thing about this is this one versus all system that they created is actually relatively unique and it's relatively dynamic, and you're shuffling your energy between a couple different piles and how you want to manage it and how much you regain per turn. And the system itself is, I think relatively well thought of. Now the explanation of said system, that's a whole nother issue. So I would hope, as I've not seen on this page yet, and maybe I just skipped it, hopefully I just missed it and am, talking out of my side of my mouth here more than anything else, that they've upgraded the rulebook and it's significantly changed from the first or second or maybe third time around. So, again, 50 euros for just a versus mode. And that's a lot just to get a 1 versus 1 mode. If you want a 1 versus 1 game, go buy a whole core pledge of Mythic Battles something for just over that price and you'll have a much better value. But getting a new load of content here is essentially what you're getting. So I wish there was more on the page. I'm not going to give them a write-off just because, again, big company. But there's absolutely nothing in terms of mechanics here. There's absolutely nothing in saying why you should get this apart from labeling it exclusive. There just isn't. And I like the fact that they've got the draft rulebook here, but it's just going to be some variant thereof. So I'm not really as enticed by that. You really have to be a nostalgia IP or this is one of my favorite games. I can't literally get this anywhere else because Monolith hasn't put it out in any other regular channels sort of situation. So we'll see. I mean, $250,000, already within 24 hours of funding. So I can't imagine what it's going to be at if this holds true. I mean, I was suspecting, between $1 and $2 million by the time this ends. So we'll see if the trend holds up and we'll see where it goes and how much interest there is from previous backers as well as new ones. So there you go. Hop over to GameFound. Masters of the Universe. Clash for Eternia. I don't know why I'm doing that voice. $200,000, 1,300 people. This was another test from CMON. They hopped over to GameFound and they said, we're going to test our market, test our waters, make it more accessible for people outside of North America. I mean, that was the real incentive for this campaign. And I have to look at this and wonder what the spread is going to be for returning backers getting the 2 new characters versus people that didn't get in the first time and are getting it now maybe over in Europe. So let's take a look at this split. I'm curious now. 75 times here for the gameplay exclusives. So, whoa. Wait a second. This is the exclusives. So this is all the exclusives for the first campaign. Is that a good deal? Is that a bad deal? I have no freaking clue glancing at this. Research. So I pull this up here and honestly, when I just did a little research, it doesn't really give me a clear indication because the box of power isn't really divided out. And the core pledge, if you go back over to the previous page, right, is $110, which gets you the stretch goals. So if you want to say, 3/4 of that is the, stretch goals, $70 there, $20 for the new expansion with Jitsu and Cyclone. And if you pull up Cowl, this was the exclusive for one of the extra expansions. This was the exclusive for one of the other expansions. And this was the only expansion, Wrath of Snake Mountain, which was actually exclusive. So $50 if you say like 60-ish for that one, and $20 for that is $130. So you're paying $20 each individually for that. So not a great deal, but if you love it, I guess it's okay. And that's, on top of all the non-gameplay stuff as well, $75. And let's just see, box of power goal right there. Well, I mean, when you say it's $100, well, it makes this look a lot better, right? Because if that's $100 and that's $20 and that's $50, that's $170. So you're getting $170 basically as a wash, and you're getting these 2 little ones for free. So that's not as bad a deal when you frame it that way. But if you don't frame it that way and you look back over here for the core pledge here, it's only $110 for the core and the stretch goal box there. So that is a significant upgrade in price, regardless of what these other higher pledge levels are, which aren't significantly different for the all-ins-ish. So that's it, though. I mean, that's it. That's all the stuff that's there. There's nothing else new. I'm not sure why they went to GameFound. That's really more of the interesting question as a whole. And then if you scroll back up here, you start to see that the only videos here are from the biggest people of all the biggest channels. So I don't know what to make of that ever. I just don't. So they're going to be all over that, and you can get more info on it because this is, unlike a lot of other CMON properties that come out to crowdfunding, now a known property. So you can get full information, and I don't know how that affects the funding in this sense. Is that increasing it because, well, people got it and people that wanted it got it already and aren't going to get it again? Or is that meaning that it's going to potentially be a detriment if people have enough information and they can't FOMO on it? So I have no idea. And that reminds me that I need to reach out to Alex and ask him about that data from a couple weeks ago, where I was wondering if there was a game found effect, right? And some of the decrease in some of these pledges for campaigns that had run similarly earlier on Kickstarter, and he said that there wasn't. So I forgot to reach out to him. So I need to do that. So Alex, I'll be reaching out to you shortly because I'd love to see that data. Because it's just interesting. It's just interesting stuff to talk about on the channel. And I just love, soliloquying and rambling way too long on this stuff. Anyway, you want crowdfunding games. Let's go. So what else we got going on this week? Well, All Play, previously known as Board Game Tables, is back with Kabuto Sumo Sakura Slam standalone sequel expansion. Now, again, plus the Swarm expansion. And this thing, when I looked at this and I saw that there was going to be a solo campaign, I kind of was like, oh geez, how's this going to do? And now this, I will make the argument though, is probably their most well-known, their most well thought of overall top to bottom market exposure game as a whole. As a dexterity game, right? Is that crazy? I'm a big fan of dexterity games, so don't look at me. I'm not the crazy one here. I'm a little crazy. Don't kid yourself. But I was just intrigued to see what it would do funding-wise. I had no clue what the actual support for this was going to look like on a crowdfunding side of things. And so they're giving us a sequel version. And it's going to be more of a squared table is the big thing that they're going for. And they're giving you, as always, that they do a little bit of a promo and a little bit of an expansion. And so this is a little bit more, though, too. The question I have to ask is, do you need the other stuff? Do you need, well, anything previously? Is this 2.0 version? Do you really need the previous Kabuto Sumo? That'd be the only thing I'd have worries about. And it's not a big fancy dexterity game, right? Like, this is super small, slow moving, very tactically driven, a little bit of strategery in there. It's not going to be explosive. I mean, when you see this push, that's slow moving, folks. It's very tedious. It is very not dynamic, I guess, like most dexterity games, right? You flick catacombs, you flick anything else that gets flicked from a dexterity standpoint. I'm running out of all the games in my head, right? Clask, Crokinole. You get big, explosive, energetic turns, and this game kind of has the opposite feel. And so, I mean, like it says, perfect calm. That's what this game brings more to the dexterity side of things. And you're going to get a little extra. Do you need it? No, you probably don't. Is it going to be about a wash, probably from all play to get it on here versus not? Yeah, it probably is. I hope the platforms, again, that's always my biggest concern. My original base game that I backed on crowdfunding the first time around, the platform and my little pushing platform were just slightly, ever so slightly off. And it made it kind of difficult. I mean, it's kind of like with, speaking of Catacombs 3rd Edition, why I got super happy that Catacombs 3rd Edition finally from Elsewhere Games went a couple years ago, to the playmats, because you have these cardboard edges, right? You know, if you've had any big game with multiple folds in it from a big main board standpoint, that after a couple plays, after a couple folds, you can start to see sometimes those corners start to edge up. And with a game like this, you can't have edges that are just ever so slightly off, right? It's going to completely ruin the dynamic. I like the fixed corners. I like this. And you know what? This is a game that I was real hot with right away, and then I cooled off real quickly. I still have it though, so maybe I'll get that out this weekend. I just played a couple games with the kids this past week. Lacuna, huge hit with my kids, huge hit. Played 3 games back to back to back, and I could imagine us doing this as well. So I'm gonna try it out. I have the expansion in the base game still, so if it renews my love for this, I would love to see it. And it's getting you like a tag team element as well, throwing your enemy wrestler pieces. I mean, it's just doing something different. And you know what? Say whether or not it's for you. I always give All Play a lot of credit because they are really going out there and trying to be a little bit more innovative in their product line. And I love that. I love companies that have a little bit of variety. Like, don't get me wrong. You know, it's cool that you got your niche, but you know, them, Roxley, I give them a lot of kudos because they're willing to say, okay, like, we're going to give you awesomeness, just a shotgun approach of it. So there you go. Choose your wrestler, push, knock people off. That's all it is, folks. You get a little bit of expansion, you get a little bit of content, you get a little bit of asymmetric powers, additional weapons, or other things that maneuver those different discs in just slightly different dimensions and dynamics. Sure. Awesome. Oh, man. Wooden sumo rings? Oh, okay. I'll play. You know, you want to send me a review copy of that, right? The wooden version? Holy F-balls, Batman. I would totally be all on that right stuff. With a lazy Susan? Good gracious. Is that only $89? Oh, only $89. I don't know why I said that, because that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's not that much though, right? Right? That's why I have a Patreon. Sort of teasing as a whole. I'd have a hard time justifying it. My kids better love this game if I'm going to do something like that. It's out there. Plenty of content. Plenty of people have talked about it. You don't need me to talk about it. Again, second tier reviewer here, so don't worry about my opinion on it. Find one of these other ones that absolutely all love it and go listen to them tell you how awesome it is, right? So I'd just be curious to see gameplay content wise, is there some power creep? Can you have power creep in a dexterity pushing game? I don't have a clue, but you'll have it by the middle of the year. That's freaking awesome too. Thank you. Other kudos, all play. Not putting out a game that's not going to be back to you in, a year and a half. Coming to us with a product that is more complete. That is freaking awesome. Thank you. I'm done. Next game. Spires End Rangitaki. Again, right? Standalone expansion. Getting into the solo-driven card gameplay here. Session-based, choose-your-own adventure, essentially, over 3 different chapters. You're unveiling your character's pivotal moments as you're battling and, well, playing through in various ways. More of a narrative approach, as you will. Different style. So in case you're not familiar with this game, right? This is a narrative-driven adventure storytelling, talent dice rolling applicable game with only forward motion. There is no loop spiral. There is no ending up back where you started at some point, like some choose your own adventures. This is straightforward. Go until you're done. And that's what it's bringing to you. But these challenges in one of 3 different routes are going to be available to you on story cards, event cards, enemy cards, even terrain cards. And so as they present themselves to you, you have 20-sided dice that you're going to be rolling. Now, you're going to be earning talent points along the way with correct choices and correct, successes. And if you can earn those, you get to use those to influence your D20 rolls. However, the great thing is they're actually not going to be lost. They're permanent upgrades to actually allow you to better mitigate these encounters the more skilled you become as you go through the game in the first place. Every encounter, unique hooks, as they say, unique mechanics to keep things interesting. Enemies controlled by you, automated moves and attacks based on your own moves as well. Now they say in this one, the big difference is less reliance on those dice rolls though than in the previous ones. More choices, better timely decisions are going to give you more control. The main system that you're going to be managing, if you pull up the rulebook here, is called the action points. Well, right? Action points, right? Who'd have thought? Clever name there, Chris. But you have currency, essentially, as that source. And that's gradually going to reaccumulate after you have a certain number of encounters. But you're going to be having to use these for navigation, story choices, challenges, inventory items, events, and just utilization on story cards in the first place. And so you're going to be having to do that along with the battling that I just mentioned, as well as healing and trying to get more influence as you go along. It runs you through a little bit of what the encounter may look like with this 3x5 grid that you're going to be maneuvering through. And you start to see those action points will contribute to things like your attacks, things like your misses or your criticals, or augmenting your abilities in the first place. And so it's definitely a well thought of solo game. I just don't know necessarily how it compares. And again, as a solo driven card gameplay, it's really just solo. Yeah, you could play this with somebody else. You could make this 2-player, but it's 2-player holding hands, chasing rainbows sort of situation, not actually having a dynamic of 2 different people doing things simultaneously side by side, if you know what I mean there, sort of, right? So that's going to be the question is, are you a true solo person? 5 unique encounters in chapter 1 that they run you through, and then they give you, again, a little bit of overview what the encounters are going to look like here, the story cards, all of the customization that goes along with it, and everything else you kind of need to know. A little bit of stretch goal there if they hit some goals in the first place, a little bit of add-on expansion, micro expansion pack there, and that's about it. What's the pledge level price though? Because I must have missed that. Let's see. I don't even know if it's on the main page there. $42. Okay. I mean, that's not bad. I don't know if that's great or not. I don't really think this comes widely to retail though, so I would have to imagine that that's a pretty decent price, but for North America then you're going to be running almost $60 potentially as well for a solo game. How does this compare to something like Legacy of You? I mean, yeah, it's more random, it's more luck based, it's more of that style Amerithrash rather than Euro. Does that appeal to you? It's definitely got a pedigree and it's got a really solid supporting. So clearly it feels like it's doing something different enough compared to the previous 2 that people are willing to put some money down to get it the 3rd time around. So check it out if you're one of those people too. Solo game, there you go. Then we are talking about Among Cultists, right? Among Us, social deduction, the next level, the next evolution of this sort of thing. It's more complex, but it's got more dynamics. And if you've got the groove for this is a fun game. The explanation is a little bit harder. The rules are a little bit more minutia in terms of keeping track, But if you have a group dynamic that really works and likes that sort of thing and can internalize that very quickly, this is really well thought of social deduction game. My review was out earlier in the week, and you can check that out. I mean, no, it's not perfect. None of these games are, but this game brings an experience. You know, if you're an experienced gamer and that's what matters most to you, this is a good experience as a whole. No player elimination, murder mystery essentially, having lots of character actions that you can take, having lots of room actions that you're going to take, slowly making your way around. And if you end up with any room with anybody solely as by yourself, then you start placing cards in other people's lifeline decks, and you never know quite who's alive or dead until you actually check. They've got sort of the Schrodinger's lifeline, essentially, if you will. And I forgot to mention that in my review. I really wanted to use that line so badly, and I completely forgot about it. Because essentially, you might be dead and you might not know it, which means you're not dead. Until somebody actually looks, right? In case you're not familiar with Schrodinger's cat, that's essentially, there's a cat in a box, and it's, you know, can't tell if it's dead or alive until you look, right? And so simultaneously, it's in both states because you can't, anyway, you can go look it up. YouTube will do a better job of explaining it rather than me. But if you want the new stuff, well, there's Under the Surface expansion. I mean, that's the only thing I might caution you on is these expansions give you whole new boards. And so do you need a whole new board? Because it's not a standalone expansion, but you're replacing all of the boards that you're utilizing there. So unless you're going to play this a dozen plus times through in a short amount of time, you probably don't need the expansions if you haven't played the base game yet to get this real sense of what your favorite dynamic is. So that's just a minor thing as a whole. Got a lot going on. Like I said, it's a 25-minute plus teach if you're doing a good job with it. Once you learn it, it's smooth. But there's still a lot of little niches that make it a step up, that make it a little bit harder to keep track of, that can always sort of snag social deduction games if people aren't as meta aware, if you will. Like if you mess up on something, it's going to be a little bit more obvious when you've got this many rules of maybe what side you're on or what side you're not on, essentially, more than anything else. And that can happen a little bit with this. So otherwise, you know, they did a fantastic job with this game. And if it's for you, it's for you. If it's not, it's, you know, if you're not a big social deduction person, this game's not going to change your mind either. You're going to look at this and probably go, it's too complex. So that's okay. I like the variable win conditions. I like the get points instead of just randomly accuse and hope that you're right until somebody or half the people are dead and maybe you got the right person along the way. Rulebook's there. Videos are out there. Everything's there. Check it out if you want. Check out my review from earlier in the week if you're really interested. Again, I'm sure someone else did a better review on Board Game Geek that you can take a look at as well. But it is unique. I give them a lot of kudos for that. The only other thing I didn't think was quite as strong was not the factions themselves, but some of the individual character asymmetry, right? You know, like with werewolf, like it's werewolves or villagers, but then they're like, here's 37 different types of villagers and here's 6 different types of werewolves, and that's probably not its strongest suit. Some of the other individual like roles that you can play aren't the strongest, I didn't think, personally speaking, for myself, but also, you know, that's not what it's going for as well. Like that's not the main experience of this. It's a nice sort of slight addition, but I think you're also pretty good without it too. I wouldn't mind it being better. I mean, right, obviously. But at the same time, it didn't detract if I didn't have it either from that side of things. So what's the Under the Surface expansion adding? Sinister tentacles, organisms are coming after you imprisoned within the wasteland. And then the previous two, Down in the Abyss and Mountains of Chaos, are just offering you additional more stuff that I have sitting right next to me as well over there. So check them out if you want. And you get a little bit of exclusive here. Let's see. Upgrade your game, best price, exclusive little card there. And that's probably the other cool thing of this game. I really like this mechanic. This says what rounds you can do what actions, which really increases the tension and the paranoia, because why did that person do that this round? Is it because they're the cultist and they can just do whatever they want? Or is it because that was the only action that they had this round available to them that would actually be helpful in some way, shape, or form? So that's probably my favorite cool mechanic that I haven't seen done elsewhere in other games. So that was by far and away one of the biggest appeals, or one of the biggest things I liked about it in the first place. So there you go. Among Cultists, Godot Games, and everything you need to know on the page and not from me. Check it out. So next up, Thunderbird Games, we have Metrorunner, sort of a worker placement area control style game where you're going to be taking on jobs, moving across to action selection board spots, as well as trying to achieve the most jobs matching the areas, which will actually give you victory points at the end if you have the most that matches your own area, but also other areas in addition. And that's the gist of the game. Now, $40,000, they're already funded. It's a lower price point. There's not really a whole lot otherwise in terms of extras, essentially. You get the little mini expansion like Thunderworks has done in the past, but that's about it. So you're taking this cyberpunk-esque theme, you're moving through these areas, you have a certain number of moves that you can do per turn, but it does not count if somebody is in front of you in a space, so you kind of skip over them because you can't land in the same space. And then you can also boost your actions using actual boosts or discarding cards, job cards, or resources in order to go further in, say, your move phase. Then you take your action phase. Depending on what zone you're in, you have individual selected spots that have actions on them, but also in the larger districts themselves, there are going to be special district actions that you can take separately that are going to allow you to gather more job cards in order to complete them, a la your quest system, essentially, if you will, but then also to gather the resources that you're going to need to complete them in the first place, as well as other things like hacking, and then going into the actual creation and completion of those jobs, using them to climb the tracks up that you're keeping track of in terms of your victory points and resources, and just getting the most points by the end of the game. And because, again, you're going to be doing those actions and jobs that are specific to different districts, they're going to reward you in those ways. The mini expansion is going to go along with it. You get the special pan-op tiles down here. That's interesting. Metal. Okay. And then here's the drop site mini expansion. That's it. There's a couple of videos preview-wise down here from Metrorunner and Thunderworks. But that's about it. They offer you some free pickup at some of the larger conventions later in this year, which means, again, second project now in this video that are launching and being delivered this year, which, again, kudos. Shipping, whatever, you know? So, like with Thunderworks Games, it's a price point conundrum, if you will. You like supporting them, you get it here. You want to wait and see if you can save $3 or $5? Okay, you get it elsewhere. Next up, Knight. This is a print and play, right? $7,000 for a print and play. This is overachieving, I would make the argument. But I'm not going to be able to give you too much of the details and the mechanisms of this because this is one of the most complex roll and writes that I've seen recently. The rule book is a little bit harder to decipher, but it's also 18 pages long for a roll and write. So are you looking for something like that, of the comparable ilk, as the designer says even on this page, his or her or their response to Hadrian's Wall. And so that's what you're getting into. And Radek, I actually recognize that name now that I looked at it. He's done a lot of other print and plays, I believe. And this is, that. So strategy, area control, 3 different modes that you can play in, a solo, a simultaneous, meaning, you just play with someone else sitting next to you, right? And then you have a war game mode where you can go head to head and share the same map as opposed to having your own map of each individual doing it separately while just being next to the person as a whole. So the artwork is fantastic. The rulebook is definitely just a prototype rulebook, so check that out. And the design and the setup needs to be a little bit finished on there. But you're essentially choosing your knight, choosing your scenario, drawing your goal cards, taking your turns using the active sides of the event cards. Because there's going to be a splaying of event cards that are going to be available to you. There's going to be a splaying of sort of overarching action cards as well. One at each end, I believe. It's action cards. I'm using the right term there. Probably not. But they're going to be available to you as well. And there's going to be 6 of them up top. And only the ones on the ends are going to be available to you. And then you're choosing how you want to utilize these cards. Not double-sided, but just 2 aspects, the left or the right in that sense. And then going along and taking actions and consequences accordingly from that side of things. So that's everything. That's all I'm going to be able to give you. It's print and play. They say you'll get the PDF when the campaign actually ends because it's all set. So all in is only going to cost you €10. If you're a roll and write, if you're a heavy roll and write junkie, is it worth you trying this out for €10? They're going to hit a couple of these stretch goals as well already. We'll probably hit all of them actually by the end of the campaign. If the biggest one right now is only €10,000 and they're at $7,000. So boom, there you go. Your roll and write of the week. Next up here we have Fate Defenders of Grimhelm, and this is going to be a little bit of a conundrum for me because this game actually looks up my ilk. It looks like a pandemic style light tower defense scenario driven game because basically Loki is attacking your village after Thor and whoever else are getting married and all their good heroes are away and you're this scrappy band of misfits essentially that need to upgrade and up level and all that up stuff that you can think of in order to win and defend the village in the first place. But Fryx Games, this is from the makers of Terraforming Mars, right? So I would have high expectations of what this is going to show me, and unfortunately there is absolutely nothing on the page. I'm sorry, there's nothing useful on the page whatsoever. I had to go actually watch One Stop Co-op Shop's video to actually get any sense of the game whatsoever. There's no rule book, there's no mechanism explanation, there's no anything from that regard whatsoever. Hey, you know what? You're gonna save €20 on 3 promo packs. Hey, there's 2 little expansions to go along with it. That's about all you're gonna know apart from what the description is. kill bad guys, gain experience, upgrade your hero, solve quests, right? Like generic descriptions, which is unfortunate because I think there's actually a one or two unique cool mechanisms, because they take the action selection system that Expeditions uses from Spire games, right? Where you cover things up and then the things that you're covering up, you can't choose again. And so they use that, and they've got like 6 or 8 different actions that you can take on a turn by turn basis, but you have 2 action markers that you're gonna be sliding around, covering them up as you go. And you get 2 actions on your turn to do these sort of things. And you have asymmetric characters with asymmetric decks that are not only going to have action cards but also item cards, and you only get to use like the one that's on top that's like showing, and when you use it, I think you cycle it down to the bottom of the deck, and so you go through it that way. But they also have like quest cards written on the equipment or the item cards, so if you complete the quest, you like unlock it or upgrade it for like free as you're going. And you've got these scenario setups with like a Hespex system that the enemies are going across and you're fighting them off as they're getting closer to the village. I mean, it looks kind of cool as a whole. But that's all I can tell you, because again, I don't know what else there is, and the prototypes that they have don't have you know, much more than what I've said there. It sounds like each card deck, like I said, 40 cards, abilities, equipment, events. Each of the promo packs, if we scroll down here far enough, on top of the add-ons, which again are miniature basically extras. Scroll down here far enough, we'll get to the promo packs. I mean, 49 euros is expensive for this pandemic-esque game. Now you can add a little bit of extra stuff if you want, all the extra stuff right there for a total of 65. But without a rule book right now, I'm going to have to pass, because I also don't need the miniatures, and I don't know if this is really going to be, I mean, $55 to $60 before shipping for this game, because I would expect that Fryx is going to have this at retail, just like Terraforming Mars. Now, they run you through a little bit of the daily reveals, if you will, because they're not really unlocks. They're all going to be unlocked anyway. Here you go, the promos, the hero equipment, the events, and the threats. So that's it. That's all that's on the page whatsoever. They gave you semi-renders, and shipping is even going to be another 15 euros. So, I mean, you're going to be talking $70+ essentially for the base game alone from this. And I don't see the value there. Again, not in this always for value, but I don't know why I would get this now and not wait for it, especially when it's all basically previews. Although, you know, I guess Undead Viking does have a review on there, so I take that back. But no rulebook as well. So that's, you know, a game that's going to end up on my, you know, want list on Board Game Geek, but not a game I'm going to be willing to back right now without significantly more detailed information. And wondering too, you know, okay, are there only going to be 4 characters? You're playing with the same 4 characters. You know, how asymmetric are they? And they appear to be pretty asymmetric, but is it going to be suitable for your needs from a pandemic-esque style? So that's what you need to figure out. So there you go. Next, we'll cover this one just very briefly. Historical War Games, Dark Black has 2 expansions for Black and Orange Swan. Historical game company out of Italy. And they're giving you expansion content for World War II games, and you just want to influence countries and play with new stuff on a war game style of things. Again, I have no interest in war games whatsoever, but I thought I'd cover it because it's almost at 200% of its funding goal, and war games are still a niche, and war games are still good tabletop games. It's just whether or not it's right for you. But that's all I'm going to say before I get myself in trouble. Now, 0 Day War. This is actually the one I saw being most advertised on Facebook, of all places. Again, I had to watch the video because there's next to no information on how the actual mechanics of the gameplay work in that sense. What you end up doing is you end up playing these cards out in this grid that is essentially player dependent. So 3 players, 3x3 grid, 4 players, max 4x4 grid. And so you're laying these cards out, but then you're also laying cards face down, which are hacks. These hacks lay a certain number of cubes down on them, which is essentially the countdown until the hack goes off. And when the hack goes off, it's going to allow you to score points. It's going to allow you to hack the files, but it's not going to be hacking the file necessarily that of the one you slide it under. It's going to have arrows that are going to be directing it towards ones that are around it. And they're going to allow manipulation of those cards in the first place as well. But even the 3-minute overview doesn't really give me the full sense of how that manipulation is going to work and what those actions specifically are, and just the nitty-gritty that it's going to entail. Again, I think this is an interesting concept as a card-laid tableau, take that point scoring based off of utilizing manipulation. It reminds me in a completely different way of, what is it, Combo Clash up there, but just in a card-driven sort of action system as opposed to the cards having like a matching what Combo Clash does. So you can see a little bit of what they've got going on here, these exploit cards that are going to allow you to do it. The file cards that are going to be out there as well. And I take that back, you don't flip them over, but anyway. Moot point there, idiot expansion. But then you get a little expansion to go along with it that gives you a little bit more of a game mode and manipulation of the stacks themselves. So I just wish there was more on the page. Like, this is something I think is an intriguing concept, and I'd like these fast, card-driven gameplay games, but I just need more. I just need more. Show me a rule book. Show me exact like turns. Give me something to see how those are going to be manipulated and what the abilities are, apart from just a graph here that doesn't quite tell me. And you start off with an asymmetric planet and, you know, all of that thing. And here are the hacks that you can go through. But that's it. I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, it's expensive for what it is. It's an indie publisher. I mean, it's not going to get, you know, anywhere else from that aspect. $70 for a deluxe version. Again, that's a lot. You know, 40 I can maybe, 70 is a bit more, but they're at 50% of the funding goal. So we'll see what it looks like by the end of the campaign. So check it out. Then another interesting little indie game here. We have Jewels for the Emperor Penguin. And this one is funded. This one is over 130% of its funding goal at this point. And what you're doing here is you have these little penguin meeples and these dice. And dice are going to be rolled and correspond to the number of the penguins that you have, like 1 through 5 in a wild. And so if you roll that penguin, you move that penguin, right? And so you're essentially moving them out along these ice, and then depending on how many you can move on a certain turn, but then you can also bump to move your guild, as they're called, your team, out further. You then get to take 2 actions based on where these penguins end up. And these actions on these icebergs where these penguins end up, there's going to be 2 different ways that you're going to be taking these actions. Either the action that the first one basically there gets, but then an action that is dependent on how many are there, that everyone there gets as well. And so how you want to divvy those up as you're going along, and you play a certain number of rounds until I believe you're playing through 5 objective cards are, you know, able to be bought based on the resources that you're gathering from these actions in the first place. And then the game ends, I think, after everyone else gets a turn again. So that's essentially it, right? 3 rewards actually in this one. The arriving, sliding down, because there's also ice ramps that you can't climb up. So you move adjacent to these hexes as you're moving across, but you can only move like down, right? The big slope. You can't climb up it. It's ice, right? You can't do that. Collecting the jewelry. Here's the 5th player buying your card ends the game. Yeah, there you go. Teach and play. There's a rulebook on here as well. I don't know what this is. The frozen little, and then we have down here the Emperor's Penguin's Nephew. And that's just a little mini game that's a card-driven tableau builder, essentially, is what it looks like. So I kind of like the penguin. I wish my 3-year-old would actually get into stuffies. But, I mean, penguins with rocket launchers, right? Penguins with rocket launchers. Penguins with rocket launchers. Penguins with rocket launchers. Okay. If they hit 100,000 or 1,500 backers, they'll give everyone another copy of this game. Ever seen the movie Penguins? Right? That's totally what that reminds me of. So anyway, there you go. Jewels for the Emperor Penguin. Next up, Geektopia Games, Essence of Eternity. Funded already. So let's take a look at this card-driven gameplay, because what you've got essentially going on is you've got asymmetric heroes that are going to be trying to complete this potion elixir recipe of immortality. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be trying to gather these runes that you need based on your individual recipe that are all individually unique, that are you're hiding from your opponents. And the basis of this is you need the 3 runes that are on the inside, and then you need 3 of the 6 that are on the outside. You need 1 of each of the 3 different colors. And so you're going to be gathering those up as resources by defeating monsters in combat or gathering from their individual 3 scaled difficulty decks. And you're drawing cards based on the exploration limit that you have, depending on your own level, essentially. And so the forest, then the mines, then the underworld in terms of increasing difficulty, increasing monster difficulty, as well as increasing rewards. And essentially what you're doing is you draw these cards to your explorer limit until you hit a monster. If you hit a monster, then you go to the combat phase. The combat phase is then driven by flipping over the top card of the fate deck, which determines the monster's attack strength, essentially. Actually, no. The monster's attack strength is determined by whatever value it's on its card, but then you get to draw the top card of the fate deck, which is the base value of your attack system that you need to overcome the willpower of the monster in the first place to win it. And if you can, great, you win it, and it becomes a minion that you can use to supplement and boost your own further combats or successes later on. It also gives you loot at the same time. But the tricky part is not only can you boost yours, other people can interfere and boost the enemy that you're trying to overcome in the first place. You don't know what runes are going to be the most important for them when they're gathering these resources or when they're fighting other monsters from their battles on their individual turns. So there's a potential heavy, as this game says, uncooperative take that style of things. So unless you're a really big fan of the take that, this game could go very flat for you, or it could go very quickly because people aren't willing to do it from that aspect. As you can see on the monsters here, we have 3 different values that are located here. Just the individual support strength, then the loot, and then the interference support strength that it gives if you lend it towards another monster or another player's battle. So that's essentially what you're doing. You can play cards from your hand in order to boost yours over the others. And if you win, you get it supplemented to your own. Then you have spells that you're going to be able to cast in the next phase of things. And then there's sort of a cleanup phase that you go through and, well, decide if you've won or not. So first one to assemble all of their runes wins of the 6 that you need. So that's about it. Fate check is going to be big. Draw deck is going to be random. It's going to be highly utilized, and it's going to be a heavy take that, like I mentioned. I wish there was a little bit more gameplay example on the page, but there is a rulebook that you can check out as well. So we'll see kind of where it goes and what else it gets going and how it's received so far, because it's funded. So we'll see what the end product looks like too at some point. So there you go. Now, I was going to talk about this one. I was all set to go into Flow of Fate. I was like, oh man, $3,000. It's not, reached its funding goal yet. It's got $11,000 funding goal, but it just launched. So maybe it's on a good track. And then I saw the big thing below that, right? Two backers. So you got like a $1 backer and a $3,024 backer, right? Anyway, I don't know. I didn't actually look. But if we go down here and we actually see where these pledge levels are, yeah, you have one at the $14. One at the $14. So someone else is pledging $3,011 at this point. I'm sorry, I'm not sure you're gonna fund, and if you are funding, well, that's an issue because you're gonna have about 6 copies of the game. Anyway, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully this relaunches. Hopefully we can get some more support. I didn't even know what this game was beforehand, but card drafting with knights, robots, dragon robot knights, dragons. I'm not sure. You know what I said there. Robot dragons. We'll see. I'll mention it either way. There you go. Next up here, D-Day Dice. Well, it's a second edition, essentially, of D-Day Dice, 15 years after they funded the first time, and it's really a cute disclaimer down here when we get down to the text. It says, hey, when this funded the first time around, back in like 2011, this was the most successful board game ever funded on tabletop at that time, because it was the first one ever to break $100,000. That's kind of cool, though. That's kind of a cool claim to fame. $38,000. I mean, it's war game with dice, folks. If you're interested in that, if you want more dice, if you want that style-driven game with a World War II theme, that's what you're going for. They give you the ability to upgrade if you just have the first edition, and they're offering, just a ton of other stuff, including new battle maps, new campaign, and third edition rules, it says here, actually, so I take that back. But a whole bunch of other stuff. Legendary cards, legendary characters, a whole bunch of teasers here for some of the newer stuff there, and a whole bunch of other stuff from the previous as well. So a bunch of add-ons, everything you can think of under the sun. And if you're a fan of this, you're a fan of it, just like the other war game. I'm not going to give you too much details. This is outside of my particular area of expertise, but it must be a pretty well-received product. $40,000 is still $40,000. Like I say, I wish there was more actual how you play this game as a whole on the page, apart from one playthrough and a Rado video. So, again, it's a little bit lacking, as a couple of these other were at the end of the week here, but we'll see where it goes. And, maybe this one will break $100,000 too. So there's D-Day Dice again. Now, near the end here, we have Bloodthrone, the Tower of Sacrifice. Now, this looks really fancy. This looks really pretty. Except it's a miniature-based RPG tabletop dungeon crawl-esque game that already is $46,000 is amazing, right? Of a $50,000, funding goal. Awesome. First time created, first time backed. Okay. It's a game store that's bringing out their own game. Okay. 1 to 7 players. Okay. 1 to 2 hours. Okay. Generic fantasy description, battling horrifying monsters, get a cheaper price and expansions and early delivery. And we'll talk about that early delivery in a second here, though. Here's a little bit of what's in the box, as you can see here. Whole bunch of miniatures, whole bunch of pop-up terrain. And now I have a feeling that the price point that we're going to talk about in a second is mostly due to this pop-up terrain. Looks kind of cool. No assembly required. But that's also why it's going to cost you $200 for the core game. And another $60 expansion, another $80 expansion, and another $250, $275, $335, and $500 bundle as well. So, whoo dog. When is this supposed to be delivered, though? This is supposed to be delivered, folks, by the end of 2024. The end of 2024. A company that has never made a miniature game, I think, in less than a year, they're going to give you a full miniature game with full pop-up terrain. Right. No rulebook. Slight narrated gameplay video here. This is a paid preview that kind of cuts out a lot of the actual action and gives you like an overlaying narrative in between the actual people talking. So it's very slick, but you kind of get this generic RPG dungeon crawl feel. I don't get the, why is this different, right? Am I really paying a 100% premium essentially on a dungeon crawl game for pop-up terrain? That's kind of what it feels like. Now you have tons of characters, right? I think there's something like 12 or 10 or so in the core, and the expansion that's $80 gets you another 12 characters, and they have asymmetric abilities here. But again, timetable, there's no way a core box that big is only going to cost you $15 too, unless they're supplementing significant shipping in North America. So you can be looking anywhere between $200 and $500 for this. So again, not that it's not going to be okay, but with this little of information about why I'm going to get you over all of the other proven dungeon crawlers out there at this point, especially with no mechanistic approach and no rulebook, you know, gonna wait and see more than anything else. So there you go. Then Dungeon Twist. This is just a tile laying, grab 'em and, you know, take that style game. The big twist on this one, essentially, is that as you're laying these tiles down, gathering loot, getting instant effects, having your asymmetric, unique character that you each have, is that the tiles can actually be replaced as you're laying them or as you're going along, because one of the things that you can do in this game, and we go down to the mechanisms here, is that you can actually just swap empty tiles that are already out there. You can rotate empty tiles out there as long as they continue to match up. You can even permanently shape the map by playing these rooms or robbing other people. So get your gear, get your treasure. First one to get out ends the game as a whole, and you only have one more turn. Otherwise, you just don't get the score at the end. All your asymmetric characters, a little bit of stretch goals there as well for more tiles and more rules, which is kind of weird, right? Like core upgrades and more rules. Anyway, but bundle it if you want. It's an indie game as a whole. Early bird, though, is still going to cost you almost $60, which is expensive for a tile laying game like crowdfunding, but won't see it elsewhere. Probably wouldn't get funded or published otherwise. So if you want, check out Dungeon Twist. So there you go. That's the roundup for this week. A little bit of everything. Some big names, some small funders at the end there. A little bit of everything, just fun to talk about as well. So we'll see kind of where that's at and what we're up to total wise in terms of the game count. You know, we are well into the 20s, almost at 30 total games covered at this point. So I'm going to be keeping track this year. If you missed last week's, I'm going to keep track of how many of these I do this year of all 52 weeks. It won't be 52 weeks. It'll probably be like 48 or 47 or 49 or I don't know, somewhere around there. You know, I skip a couple weeks. I'm on vacation a couple times. Whatever. There's a couple slow weeks like the last week of December. So, you know, it'll probably be mid 40s somewhere, but we'll see how many games we actually end up covering this year as a whole. Because I think that's more of an interesting thing, because you realize I'm reading a lot of the rule books for all of these, which means I'm reading probably 3/4 of the rule books every week and giving you a best summary I can in the shortest amount of time, which is a ton of rule books to even say that I read, apart from the stuff that I'm doing, reviewing on the channel as a whole as well. Ha! I'm done. I got nothing else. We got no plans this weekend. The kids had a snow day again on Wednesday this week. So like my kids have yet, they're going to be going into the almost the tail end of January without having more than 2 school days in a row so far in 2024, which is crazy insane. But we played a bunch of games this week as well, even when they were on school and off school. So oldest kid wanted to play some Dice Throne. We played some Dice Throne. He was all in that. I whooped him. I was Doctor Strange. I whooped Miles Morales' butt. Yeah, I went Strange, right? I killed it with Strange. I finally got Strange to flow and work, so that was kind of cool. And then we played Lacuna. Swept the board with Lacuna, too. It was close, though. Every single Lacuna, it was 4-3. 4-3, and went down to the last color every single time. So, again, that's in my top 10 list of 2023. So that will still be coming out before the end of the month as well. I have 2 videos coming out for games launching this upcoming week on crowdfunding as well. So those will be coming out over this weekend, either Saturday, Sunday, and or Monday or Tuesday. So we'll figure out how those are going to click, line up, and go from there. So that's all I got. Tomorrow, again, side note here at the end. If I do these separate board game news videos, but how would you feel about me combining the board game news videos and the upcoming crowdfunding videos, right? Like a little bit of summary of what went on the past week, but also a little bit of what's upcoming for the next week. Just a thought I had randomly the other day, because I do the board game news videos because there's not like enough on a weekly basis to do a video by itself. It takes about 2 or 3 weeks for me to gather enough stuff up, which means I'm very like way behind some other people that are like, I talk about everything every week. And so, I mean, that's fine. I don't really care. But I just had that thought, like I could incorporate them both. And, you know, is that enticing to you? Do you have any interest in that? I don't know. Just rambling here at the end. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. Thanks for tuning in. Over 9,000. Over 9,000. Close to 10. I don't really know. I haven't looked in about 2.5 weeks. I haven't looked since the end of 2023 where I'm at subscriber-wise. So who knows?